Okay, so good morning. Here we are. All ready for business. Where business is pleasure. Maybe we start just by some quiet sitting, just allowing ourselves to arrive fully in our body, using the breath as a support. So make sure that your skeleton's supporting you properly, relaxing your muscles, and just allow your attention to focus on the breath flowing in and out very gently. And we just sit quietly like that for a while. There's nothing else to focus on or worry about. Just quietly being with the pulse of your existence. Okay. So the topic that we have for today and tomorrow morning is a way of developing the clarity of the mind. Can you find a place to sit?
Yes. There's a few more seats on the floor at the front here. If anyone else.
So we look a little bit at ideas in a Tibetan, it's called in Tibetan Lojong, and this is a system of approaching how the mind functions and how one might clarify the ways in which confusion arises. What I want to do is to show how this stands in relation to the general understanding of Dzogchen. Dzogchen and Lojong are rather different, but they can be used in harmony. Lo in the Lojong means intellect. It means the capacity of the mind to have a reflective clarity, to see what's going on for oneself, and jong simply means to develop or to purify. So it's really about developing an integration of an observing capacity and an executive capacity. That is to say, to be able to see how one is moving or situating oneself in relation to internal and external experience, and then how to mobilize oneself in a way that will make a difference with that. The Lojong tradition in Tibetan Buddhism comes largely through the early group in the new translation system called the Kadampas, and they are in many ways the forerunners of the modern Gelugpa groupings. These words may mean something to you and they may not. We'll get to the heart of the matter soon enough, but I just set out that frame. That was a tradition that was starting in Tibet in about the 10th century of the Christian era. It was a tradition based on the Mayahana principle of developing wisdom and compassion, particularly a notion of taking a Bodhisattva vow, focusing one's existence on the liberation of all beings. And that in order to take up such a profound challenge to one's own self-centredness and selfishness, one had to engage in a great deal of struggle. So in a sense, it's a model of mental struggle in which one becomes more aware of one's tendencies of self-protection, tendencies of ignoring the state of others, of not wanting to be interrupted by the way in which the very existence of other people places a demand on ourselves. So the Bodhisattva notion is really very radical. It says the most important thing is that all beings awaken. And my role in relation to that is to become a servant of these beings. So that the purpose of my existence is nothing other than servitude. And in many of the texts from Shantideva and many of the writers, they use the notion of I voluntarily go into servitude for the sake of others. In our time, this is an incredibly radical idea. We live in a time of extreme self-definition, of people wanting to make their lives on their own terms, people finding ordinary family duties and responsibilities to be very onerous, let alone the notion that you could tilt your energy out in duty, in servitude for the well-being of all others. So this aspiration, which carries with it a line of intentionality, is used as a kind of marker that lets us see the ordinary flow of our intentionality. And I'll explain more precisely what I mean by this. Consciousness, our ordinary consciousness, is always engaged in activity. It arises as a gesture towards something. We hear a sound. That is to say, our consciousness of sound arises towards or with the manifestation of the objective sound itself. If there is no particular sound around, the sound consciousness is not arising. If there's no particular taste around, the taste consciousness is not arising. From the Buddhist point of view, it's not that there is a permanent readiness to taste things, it's that taste consciousness requires an object. So a lot of the time, if you're sitting here, maybe listening or daydreaming, whatever, you're not very aware of what's happening in your mouth. And then all of a sudden, you have a sense of it. That the sense of taste requires an object. You have to be tasting something. You have to be hearing something. That is to say, we could say all mental events are transitive. They take an object. Even at times when we appear to be doing something quite simple, like relaxing. I'm just relaxing. What are you relaxing? Not relaxing anything, I'm just relaxing. We are actually relaxing something. Because our mind, if we start to observe what happens, even in states of repose, we're on about something. Consciousness is structured dialogically. There is always a subject and object component. So this is very important as a Buddhist understanding. If we don't really get a handle on this, a lot of the Buddhist practice doesn't make any sense. Because what it's saying is that I, me, myself is never solitary. There is no possibility of being an autonomous agent. The notion of willpower, of me being in myself and then moving out towards the world or towards other people is an illusion. That I am constituted in relation to others. The other is always with me. I do not exist apart from the field of my experience. So that a great deal of the conceptualization that we have about ourselves is quite wrong. It's a delusion, an illusion. We wander around in our lives imagining, I am going to do this, I am going to do that, as if we are moving out from some stable, safe place and exerting a choice which perhaps defines who we are. I don't like to wear the color green, I like to wear the color blue. So that's who I am, and when I go to the shops, I know what I want. And that knowing what I want is a property inherent in me. It is my property. from this traditional Buddhist point of view, that would be fallacious. It appears to be like that. But actually, our tilting and our tendencies are prefigured by patterns which are established in previous lives. We're born already with a repertoire of tiltings and adjustments. We're drawn towards some things and not towards others. And this gestural movement of being drawn towards, this already being off balance, being for something in particular and not for something else, this is how our existence reveals itself. Not as something apart, but always already involved. And as we start to recognize that we're always already caught up in the world with something or other, the question ceases to be one of shall I or shan't I, but rather how can I maintain a sense of balance in the midst of this flow of experience which I cannot stop. It's one of the things we start to see when we do meditation practice, that the flow of thoughts, feeling and sensation is ceaseless. It never comes to an end. This is what existence is. It's a flow, and we are in the flow, and we are of that flow. So to imagine that you're on the bank of the river having a choice whether you jump in or not is an illusion. The bank of the river is also moving. What looks like the bank of the river is just a big log in the middle of the Mississippi. You're floating down with Mark Twain, you know. There's nowhere to hide. And so it's about recognizing and finding a way of being at home in the dynamic flow of experience. And both Dzogchen and Lojong have quite a lot to say about this. So, at the heart of experience is intentionality. Intentionality is a very important topic in modern psychology, also in modern philosophy, through phenomenologists like Husserl and Merleau-Ponty, through other critical thinkers like Bakhtin, a sense that somehow we have an intention, and that intention defines our frame of reference. And it's very particular. Our intentionality is embodied. So if I hear a sound out on the road and I turn towards that sound, my lived experience is now of what is there. Now I hear a cough over here and I tilt over towards that. So my intention is going with, is tracking and is arising in relation to phenomena as they manifest. And in each of these turns, I am resituated in my being. That's why daily life is so exhausting, because we're being tilted around moment by moment as we respond to what's going on through the senses. Our intention is to check out what's going on, because we have to be about something. Consciousness is always about something. We're always thinking about something, feeling something, having a sensation. Something arises for us. This is the duality of our experience, a subject and an object. Sometimes the object is clearly outside, like a car driving by, and then we think, here I am, in this room, aware of a car driving by. And sometimes the object is something inside ourselves. And some of the internal states, subject and object run very closely together, and they can feel as if they are all of a piece. For example, you might have a mood of sadness, a mood of depression, a mood of elation. That tends to be a very fused kind of state in which it seems to be just one thing. I am happy. There's now the state which I am now merged in. Or someone might have an impulse. I'm so angry about this, I want to smash something, and I just abandon myself into that urge and I break something. In that moment, it appears that the subject is unimpeded in its flow into the impulse, which is actually something it's aware of. And of course, we would say that's when people become very dangerous, when they find themselves unable to or are unwilling to stand apart from the temptation of confluence, of merging into an impulse. Because we're always tempted by lots of impulses. Impulses to be lazy, to be stupid, to get lost sexually, through alcohol, through gambling. People throw their lives in all sorts of ways. But if one really looks into the heart of an impulse, a mood, there is still a subject-object movement. It's always very interesting if one can help people to observe what it's like to be profoundly depressed. Because actually, someone has always been depressed. Who's depressed? I am. What's your depression like? I don't know, I'm just depressed. Well, you are depressed. Yes, I am just depressed. You don't understand, you don't know what it's like. But actually, if you can get closer to the person, they start to be able to see that even when they are profoundly in it, they are in something. That is to say, something is happening for me. And because depression itself is a flow of experience, as is everything, moment by moment it's changing, there are subtle, nuanced ways in which subject and object are interplaying and redefining each other. This is a central notion, and it's something that it's really worth inspecting, and we'll do some meditation to help us do that later. But to really be able to see that we are never apart from duality. And this has radical implications for how we think about the mind. This duality means that there is no boundary or border between subject and object. That subject and object are much more like an infinity loop. They're just ceaselessly interacting. It's a co-created system, a co-emergence, a co-creation, rather than two entities standing in relationship. So if you have a friend and you think, this is my friend, here is my friend is called Tom. Hello, I'd like you to meet Tom. Tom is my friend. I stand in relation to Tom. Tom is separate from me. But what is the Tomness of this Tom? Lots of things about Tom you will never know. Maybe he's your best friend. You might have been at school with Tom. But there will always be things about Tom's experience that you have no access to. And the Tom that you describe to another friend, oh, I saw Tom last night. His life's a bit difficult at the moment. He's doing this, he's doing that. These are elaborations, confections, ways in which you edit and create a narrative about this person as if this person was somebody who could be defined. But when you hang out with Tom, Tom's shifting and changing. Tom says one word, then Tom says another word. He doesn't just say one word all evening. He says lots and lots of words. So then you meet Mary, and Mary says, how did you get on with Tom last night? Oh, it was quite nice. What did you talk about? Well, we talked about this. We talked about this. What was actually going on, you can't replicate. Our existence is ungraspable. It's not a thing that you can box and keep. Now we have a wonderful video machine, so we can look again at this moment in history. But this moment is not going to be in that machine. Because this moment that we experience together is unbelievable, inexplicable, incomprehensible. Do you imagine in this room with just our few people, how many different sensations are going on? How many kinds of emotions, how many kind of thoughts, memories, and so on are flitting by? The infinite complexity of our lived experience, which we then, in order to communicate, reduce to little shaped pieces, little set pieces, like a sort of chess game. But our lived experience is not like that. And so we always have two main possibilities. One is to try to find a way to be at home in the richness of complexity and to experience the way in which one doesn't need to know what's going on in order to have a rich and full life. That knowledge in the sense of a rational overview, a comprehension, an understanding, a stabilization of the situation is very overrated. Actually, we're just bopping along. And the main thing about life is hanging in there and being where the action is. And the action is always just whatever's going on. What can you say about it? Not much, or a lot. There are so many books now. But books are not the thing itself. We know this, and yet we get very frightened because we feel somehow we should be able to give an account of ourselves. What's the value of your existence? Who are you? What are you worth? Why shouldn't I shoot you in the head? Well, I'm quite a nice person, and I do this and I do that. And we've got our CV. We've got a way of showing our existence through an arithmetic tabulation, a building up of events, a summative view. This is who I am. Our actual experience is radically different from this. In the Dzogchen tradition, which is a tradition concerned with directly experiencing our own nature, we're concerned more with spontaneity. In the Lojong tradition, we're concerned more with trying to improve the quality of the contents of our mind. So one is about trying to understand the kind of dynamic of existence itself, and the other is trying to make a better quality of furniture in your mind. If the chairs in your mind are very comfortable, then you will be able to offer hospitality to more people. If your house is a tip, you don't really want people popping by. In the same way with your mind, if you're full of shit, if you're full of anger and irritation and selfishness, it's quite difficult to hang out with other people. You want to have an old-style front parlour, a facade, a false self, to convince other people that you're doing better than you are. But if you really want to give people a heartfelt welcome, you have to have a sense that your heart is a reasonably healthy place, that it's nothing to be ashamed of. And that's the essential movement of the Bodhisattva path, to try to shift the content of one's mind so that one feels able to open oneself in generosity towards others. Therefore, things that we might regard as unhelpful or impolite, jealousy, pride, and so on, become phenomena that we should try to shift and change. So, very important to try to see the difference between these two. One view is seeing the infinite dynamic flow of experience, an experience which is ungraspable, which when you try to find out what it is, it has already left. In the Dzogchen tradition, this is called the self-liberation of all phenomena. That we don't need to be busy adjusting our mind, because whatever is in your mind, whatever is your experience, will vanish just by itself. Just be gone. You woke up this morning, you had some breakfast or a cup of tea or something, and that time is gone. We started just after 10 o'clock, and 10 o'clock's gone. Time's moving on. What we were doing at 10 o'clock is no longer what's happening. We didn't need to say, for God's sake, stop 10 o'clock. I can't bear 10 o'clock anymore. 10 o'clock just went by itself. And all the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't bring 10 o'clock back again. Life is like that. The most liberating of all the Buddha's teachings is impermanence. And impermanence is not some mystical formulation. It's something that's there in front of your nose 24 hours a day. It's not a concept. It is the actual lived quality of our existence, that everything is a ceaseless flow. There is nothing to grasp. What we grasp are concepts. Concepts grasp concepts and create the illusion of a stabilized field of experience. I am here in Macclesfield. I have been in Macclesfield before, so I am back in Macclesfield. Where is this Macclesfield? It's in England. It's quite near Manchester. So, what is Manchester? Manchester is a name. Let's go to Manchester. Okay, where do you want to go in Manchester? I don't want to go in Manchester. I just want to go to Manchester. But you can't go to Manchester. You have to go into Manchester. Because where is Manchester? Where is Macclesfield? Are we in Macclesfield? Are we really in Macclesfield? Is there any bit of Macclesfield that is more Macclesfield than this street? Where is it? These are concepts. Macclesfield is a set of notions which can be built up. Some people will know the history of Macclesfield. They might know the history of this street. Their auntie might have lived in this street when they were growing up. Their grandfather might have worked in a factory around the corner. So for them, Macclesfield will be redolent with associations, that is to say, affectively enriched concepts. But Macclesfield per se, how will you grasp it? You can apply exactly the same thing to yourself. How will you grasp yourself? I am in Macclesfield. Who is this one who is here? Is my head in Macclesfield? Yes. How do you know your head is here? Because you can think about your head, you can touch your head, you can have a relationship with your head, you can have a relationship with your body. Are you your head? Not really. Could you live without your head? Not really. So you're half your head, or a bit your head, and a bit not your head. You can just go on like this forever, trying to find what is the real me. The self is a flow of conceptualizations and experiences. It doesn't cease as long as it's flowing. Then for a while, if we live long enough and we're lucky enough, it will slowly wind itself down, slowly untie, and the patterning, the sequence of arisings, which we give the name myself to, will start to dissolve, and we go into the death process. And then the potentiality of the mind will start to wrap new sets of situations around it, like somebody sticking a stick in a candy floss tub in the market. And this sugar strings just wrap themselves around the stick. We wrap a whole new life around us. If you hang out with small babies, you see them gradually starting to wrap themselves in stuff. They gradually look out and recognize more that's going around them. By the time they're 18 months, they've got much more sense of what's me and what's not me, and their toys and what they like, and the foods they'll eat and the foods they want. And this wrapping of oneself into the situation is always dynamic. We ourselves exist, but not as entities, not as things, but as processes of experience which are always arising in relation to another. That is to say, for each of us, the center of ourself is outside ourself. The center of ourselves is on our skin, not in some profound mandala in our heart, but it's just the surface. There is only surface. Moment by moment we are surfacing into a world whose glistening surface is changing and transforming. And as we see the world change, we change. And as we change, we see the world change. This is a very important view, because it suggests, and there's a lot of meditation that can increase our sense of this way of experiencing things, it suggests there is nothing to hold on to. The will to power, the sense of mastery and domination and control is an illusion. Our way of existence is, whether we like it or not, one of participation. We are always participating. We are always already involved in something. It's already happened. We can't stop the machine. It's always just moving on, moving on. Therefore, to hold on to concepts of stopping bad things and increasing good things by acting from a place is, on a relative level, on an ordinary level, clearly a very good one. We would like people who are violent to become less violent so that we feel safer when we walk down the street. We would like to say to people, please control your impulses, because your impulse puts other people in danger. Impulsive drivers are dangerous drivers. So on a relative level, the idea that there is a subject controlling an object, controlling themselves, controlling their motor car, controlling the amount of alcohol they consume, that's very important. That's really valid. But this is a kind of dynamic double move in the theatre of existence. There is no real self. So we have a double move. I want you to develop your lives and become better people, but you don't really exist. So who is the one who is going to develop themselves? And this is where mental development becomes really important. Two aspects. One is wisdom and the other is compassion. Out of compassion for others, we wish to become more available, more useful, to develop all our potential and our qualities. Out of wisdom, we realize that neither we nor others truly exist. So, the shadow nature, the illusory nature, the mirror reflection-like nature of existence doesn't mean that there is nothing at all. Because everything is an illusion, it doesn't mean we can just say, let it rip. That would be an extreme of a kind of nihilism, where you just abandoned existence. Clearly, what happens to people, how they suffer, is important. So our compassion takes us towards being impacted by feeling the nature of the suffering induced by the limitations that operate in other people. That takes us out towards them. But if we make that too real, too solid, then we find ourselves caught up, constrained, thinking, oh my God, how will I ever get to the end of this? What can I do? It's all too much. And that's a kind of eternalism, that one's stuck in an immutable situation. So the Buddha's teaching is always the middle way between these two extremes. Developing qualities and compassion, knowing these are an illusion, knowing that the one who develops them is an illusion, and knowing that the object of their delivery is an illusion. This is called the emptiness of the three wheels, where subject, object, and their connection are all empty, and yet the demand, the necessity, is to continue to bring out the richness of our potential. This benefits both self and other. If we take other people as too real, too strongly real, then the constraints or limitations of how they are can make us feel that the problem is insoluble. But the Buddha was very clear. He said the root of suffering is attachment. When we are connected with other people, whether it's colleagues or family, or if you're a teacher with school children, or patients, if you work in a helping profession, other people's limitations are both real and not real. A child in school who's very distracted, annoys other children in the class, makes the teaching function of the teacher very difficult. And we can say, this child really is not doing well in this class, we want them moved somewhere else. We speak as if this is a set of qualities inherent in the child. And yet, of course, this child is a dynamic process. What is lacking for the child is any clarity about what is the nature of my existence. That one can stand close to oneself and learn to modulate the movement of the expression of one's existence. It's the same with psychiatric patients. Very often they feel, this is just how I am. It's a done deal. I cannot change. But of course they're changing all the time. They're breathing in and out, they're sweating, they're drinking and pissing. The flow of their thoughts is changing all the time. So who is the one who cannot change? The one who holds to the storyline, I cannot change. Since change is always occurring, to imagine you can't change is truly a kind of madness. Since the content of our mind is changing all the time, to say, I cannot do anything with this. I suffer from repetitive thoughts. Well, if they repeat, there's a gap in between each repetition, because it's not a one homogenized stream. Therefore, there is a place where some movement can occur. So, what stops us acting on our situation? Usually, it's collusion with the environment. In my experience, when somebody develops, obsessive-compulsive disorder, you will almost always, I think, find a family that colludes with it. The family have allowed this to mushroom out. If they grabbed them by the neck, they said, just stop it early on, and reinforce their capacity to stop it, they would probably stop it. Same with people who become agoraphobic. If you want to live in your house and not go out, someone's got to bring you food. It's not very common to find agoraphobics starving to death. Usually there is a whole system of people who are in a collusive situation helping that person maintain their pathology. That is to say, psychopathology is dialogic. It's always a communication. There's always another caught up in it. Even people who are elective mute will have people going around working out what they want and what they need and being very nice and maybe writing notes for them and work out some little code of gestures that they're going to do. We're all up to something. And if we're up to something, we can be up to something else. And so the point from Lojong is to try to see what are the games that you play. What are the patterns which you highlight, which you exemplify, which you identify with and take to be yourself, and through that taking them as yourself, what are all the other possibilities of existence which you deny for yourself? If somebody is usually a kind of hot, dry character, prickly, easy and quick to anger, that becomes the modality of their existence. They move their life forward through that particular character trait. There are many other things that they could be doing. Their potential is being diminished due to the over-privileging of a narrow band of what they could be doing. So, how to help others, and first of all, of course, ourselves, to realize that we can loosen up, that we can be many, many different things, that of course we already are many, many different things. And through this incredible dynamic movement of our being, start to challenge the totalizing, the limiting, the reifying, the entifying, the substantializing nature of the stories we tell ourselves. I can't dance. People say this. I can't dance. This is nonsense. People can dance in a wheelchair. Dancing is something everybody can do, but many people believe they can't do. Or like singing. To sing is not to become Elizabeth Schwarzkopf. To sing is just to make some kind of noise, and you can sing out of tune. That's also a kind of singing. We even have a language to describe it. We say, you're singing out of tune. You're off key. Okay, I'm off key, and I'm still singing. It's a kind of singing. It's not a very good kind of singing, but nonetheless, we fit it in the generic category of singing. If you narrow your category, you can exclude a whole lot of things. If you say only Dasi Bosel can dance, then most of us can't dance. So narrow categories, knowing what's what, is often a profound murder of ourselves. Knowledge, when it precedes existence, kills off a great deal of existence. Because our existence reveals itself to us through our participation. And that participation covers a huge arc of graceful to non-graceful. I think it'd be fair to say we're all a bit clumsy with some things. Some people are socially clumsy. Some people are physically clumsy. Some people can't cook very well. Now, we could say these are mistakes, and it's important that you recognize your limitations and you don't put yourself forward as being able to do something you can't do. Can you do it or not? You have to tell the truth. Huh? So when you get into that kind of anxious, fearful thing, the world becomes very small. Because it means then, if I act outside of my box, if I show more of myself, I'm setting myself up to be humiliated. So shame becomes something very protective of myself. Because I don't want to be ashamed, I will live a very small, diminished life. I won't cause any trouble to other people, and I hope they won't cause any trouble to me. And when I'm dead, well, it won't have been too bad. Maybe there's a wee bit more to life than that. Something about just finding how we are. We are truly strange. Existence is beyond expression. We can't sum up what it's like to be us. Drinking a cup of tea, who can describe what that is? The pleasure of picking your nose. Trying to get a little bit of hard snot on your nail. Isn't it? It's amazing, these sensations. What is that? That is your existence. And what does it mean? If you pick your nose, you're a dirty person. We allow that children might do that, but adults shouldn't do that. We have all these rules and conventions. So we become properly appropriate in our behavior because we know what to do. We know what is socially adaptive. Modern government-led psychotherapy is very much about social adaptation in this insane control-driven government that we have. Absolute mad people in charge who imagine that their psychotic stance is rational and that everybody else is psychotic. This is profoundly dangerous for us because we are all psychotic. We are all irrational. The fantasy of rationality as the best place to be is profoundly dangerous for us. In Buddhism, in Mahayana Buddhism, we have a distinction between what's called relative truth and absolute truth. And the domain of relative truth is a domain really of rationality, where we can reflect and think about our existence, put whatever we do into question, examine its origins and outcomes, and through this making sense of, seeing the patterns of, we can apply our energy to make life better. In the absolute truth situation, we realize that everything is devoid of inherent self-nature. It's empty and radiant. There is just this, the immediacy of being here together. and we can't say anything about it. We have no access of control over it because we're just in it. For example, if you just relax a moment and have the experience of being in this room. When you look round, there's usually a little background conversation going on that can tell you the colour of the walls, or maybe the figures that are in the paintings, or something about the lighting. That is to say, you are organising the field of your experience. You are telling yourself what is going on. You're making sense of it. If you look around the room, some of you will recognise a lot of people, some of you maybe don't recognise anyone. So we're working out, what do I know, what do I not know? This is the realm of relative truth. It's a realm of things existing in terms of my relationship to them. But when we relax and open, there is just light. This light has all sorts of shapes, and as we move into their shaping, we say there's a door, there's a window, and so on. We're taking the open potentiality of this shimmering presence, which is the ceaseless unfolding of our existence, an existence beyond language, and we bring it into language. Relative truth and absolute truth are not opposites. They're not back to back. They are inseparable. Usually, we don't have access to absolute truth. We only have the relative truth. We only have the domain of control and organization, of trying to work out what it's all about, of putting some things up and some things down. And in this field of experience, we tend to confuse perception with projection. We think we are seeing things which are actually there, but we are projecting our knowledge onto the field of experience, and then imagining that that information is coming from the object. So, if we look over on this side, we can see a series of windows. We know that these are windows because we have a concept of windows. These things are not inherently windows. The window doesn't know it's a window. The wall doesn't know it's got a window in it. It is our mind which says this is a window. The window is made by our mind. If you had no concept of window, it wouldn't exist for you. You see that in the summertime, when these poor little flies or wasps that come into the house are trying to get out. They don't know what a bloody window is. They spend hours going up and down it. They can't work out what the hell it is. Nobody told them. Very bad mother wasps, not preparing their children for real life. But we can see it's a window, and so we put them in a jar and take them outside, and then they fly off. Because something was there and they didn't know what it was. This is our relative truth domain, applying concepts and using the power aspect of subject dominating object to give ourselves a sense of being centered and in control. This, of course, is very important. Children are obsessed by this. There was trading information, trying to learn things, to know what's what. There's an advert on the television at the moment of some parents having a dinner party with some other parents and talking about sound recording and about whether they've got digital things. And the little child's there saying, we don't have digital. And the father's boasting that they do have digital. Because children really need to know about these things. It's very, very important. Children know so little that whenever they find out something that they can know, they want to hang on it and use it as much as possible. Because they're soaking up whatever's in the environment. Because what they recognize very clearly is knowledge is power. But the power of knowledge is a double-edged sword. It gives us a degree of control and mastery over the world. You know, it's important for me to know tomorrow what time the train leaves, because otherwise I get to a cold, wet station and I'm hanging around for a long time. So knowledge simplifies existence, and yet, of course, it creates a notion that there are truly existing separate phenomena. There is a Macclesfield railway station. There is a train company. There is a timetable. if I adapt myself to that structure, all will be well. That is true some of the time in life. Sometimes the trains are cancelled. There could be a points failure. The driver maybe doesn't turn up for work. All sorts of things happen that cause trains to run late or be cancelled. Our lives are full of interruptions to the plans, and yet, generally, we want to hold to the idea that we can think ahead and we can plan. If we invade Iraq, we will be able to bring happiness to these people. George Bush and Tony Blair still seem to believe that if they keep going, things will get better. What they are exemplifying is a very helpful demonstration of what Buddhists would call stupidity. The stupidity of continuing to imagine that something is the case in the light of plenty of information that it's not. They are privileging a concept over the direct flow of real information. Rather than revise their concept, they prefer to ignore the data that's coming to them. This is the basis of all neurosis. And in Buddhism, this is the basis of our wandering in samsara. We believe we truly exist. We believe that this dimension that we live in is something under our control. We believe we know what life is all about. Paying off your mortgage, your kids getting a pension, trying to hustle and survive in the best way you can, thinking about Christmas. Life goes by in this endless flow of things to do, things to remember. What was it all for? I don't know, but it wasn't so bad. These things are beautiful. They're so poignant, aren't they? If you hang out with old people and they're going towards death, and tell their stories of their existence, and they're remembering more about how things were when they were children, and it's so beautiful. But from a point of view of Buddhism, of Dharma, you really want to weep from your heart, because they haven't woken up to what was gone on. The whole life has been spent in a dream of working hard, of taking the kids to hospital, of worrying, of difficulties in the marriage, and so on and so on. All of which has been very real. It's very poignant. It gets to us. We feel, this impact of their existence, and yet somehow the light never came on. They didn't see. This is an illusion. The illusion doesn't mean it was all a waste of time. It's more that the illusion lets us see that it has been much lighter. It has been much more sweet, much in the sense of something quite ungraspable. And that's really what we want to do in terms of absolute truth. We want to understand how emptiness and morality, or emptiness and our desire to be compassionate and helpful to other people, can be integrated, which is where the Dzogchen view of the natural purity of our existence, the natural openness of the quality of being that we all have, our existence as it's here moment by moment, is infinite. It's ungraspable. We cannot know who or what we are because we are not an object to be known. We are something just revealing itself from the inside out, something just so exquisite in its freshness. And at the same time, we're caught up in the worries and turbulence of our lives. So how can we understand that we are both limited, finite, and infinite? Most of the time we are so tilted towards our finite nature that we are working simply to modify and improve these finite structures and qualities. We want to be more generous. We want to be more diligent. We think we should lose weight, or we should do more meditation practice, or really try and learn French properly. People set themselves all kinds of tasks to do to improve themselves, all of which can be useful, particularly if the motive for developing these skills is tilted out towards the other. if it's concerned with connection with other people in the complexity of their real existence. However, the central question has to be, who is the one who is going to learn French? Who is the one who is going to learn how to make a good bechamel sauce? Who's going to do that? I am. Who is this one who calls themselves I? Profoundly looking into the nature of subjectivity, we start to see that there is a whole other dimension going on, not separate from, not above or below, but absolutely inseparable from the finite. So finite and infinite are not back to back, they're not oppositional, they're not binary oppositional categories, like big and small, they're not polarities. The infinite is the field in which the finite is manifesting moment by moment. All the limitations of our existence, which are true, which can cause us much grief and sorrow when we regret the fact that maybe we've been unkind or selfish to people we've known, we haven't done our best, we've betrayed people or let them down in various ways. All of these things that can make us very, very small are both real and not real. If we made them completely not real, just as an illusion, we would no longer be living in this human dimension and be able to connect with each other. But if we make them too real, they'll become a prison in which we feel somehow stamped by our past, marked by our past, defined and limited and imprisoned. And that is the real torture of neurosis. That's where we can't step out of our story. We can't see, oh, and it's gone. I've been a total fucking arsehole. I shouldn't have done it. I'm so sorry I hurt you. 100% true. And it's gone. So what now? It's important to confess. It's also important to be forgiven. Confession, forgiveness. Confession, forgiveness. They need to be tumbling moment by moment. If we can't confess, we can't be in the lived honesty of our existence. We can't tell the truth about how we, protect ourselves and contort ourselves in order to get our way, and we do all the funny stuff that we do. And it's gone. Because if we say, I am defined by all that I have done, I am a construct of my events, then we say, I can be summed up. I am a thing. I can be known. But how? Where is your history? You probably can remember things you did when you were a child. You might have nicked your best friend's special marble. They're steely, Put it in your pocket, and then you play with it in your bedroom. Better not let anyone see. I remember nicking something from one of my friends and hiding it in the house under the carpets. As they go down the stairs, they would have these little places, and I would hide all my little treasures in there, which of course my mother knew very well. So I was like a little squirrel putting them where someone was taking them out. And, we've all probably done little things like that. Now, what does that mean? I stole things. Am I a thief? I did steal these things, that's true, so am I a thief? If I had sex with a child, I would become a paedophile. And everything about me would be registered in that way. The newspapers would be onto me. Reporters from News of the World or The Sun would be tracking me because I would be that thing. If you murder someone, you are a murderer forever. Everybody knows, oh, he murdered that person. But if you tell a lie, are you a liar forever? So we have a world in which society is also determining what kind of activities mark people. You could be a gun runner, you could be an arms manufacturer. That's not marked the way a paedophile is. The people who are in Britain who are manufacturing landmines and sending them off for use in Vietnam and Africa, they don't get some sort of warmongers register. Tony Blair's not going to be on War Number International Register, is he? No. He's caused a lot more harm than most paedophiles have. And that way we can see that what is seen as real or true or dominant is culturally developed as well. There is no inherent truth in any of these categories. They're fashionable. Things that were considered non-problematic 60 years ago, like beating children in schools, is highly problematic now. If a school teacher hits a child, social worker or police will be called in. That wasn't the case when I was a kid at school. So many of the categories we use to make sense of our world are constructs. And we, being born into our culture at a particular time, take this particular historically developed set of concepts as real and true. Living inside that box, we work out how things are, and that becomes the limiting truth of our existence. But it's not like that everywhere in the world. And it wasn't like that 50 years ago, and it won't be like that 50 years from now. It's just a passing bubble. Of course, we need to know what are the current conventions of our culture. But that's what they are. They are conventions. And if you take a convention, something which is agreed and comes into existence because people convene, they meet together and agree that this is how we will do it. If we take something which is a construct to be something which is inherently real, we're going to be cheating ourselves. It's not completely unreal, but it's not truly and inherently real. In the traditional examples in Buddhism, it's like the reflection of the moon on water. It's like a mirage. In the summertime, if you're driving on a hot day, you see the road shimmering in front of you. It looks like water. It's not water. On a beautiful, clear, full moon night, you see the reflection of the moon in a lake, and it just seems shining. It looks as if the light's just pouring out of this wonderful white disk in the lake, but the moon is not there. It appears to be so, but it's not so. The conventional is an appearance. Everything that we experience is simply appearance. It's skin deep. It has no solid substance to it. It's not nothing at all. It's not profoundly, inherently real. The Lojong teaching helps us to move in that direction, particularly through working out the relation of wisdom and compassion. So I would suggest we take a short break now, maybe have a cup of tea and a pee, and then come back and do a little bit more of the ideas and some meditation. So, just to recap, we've been looking at how intentionality is built into the very nature of our existence, that we are always intending towards something. The flow of intentionality is governed by what is arising, both internally and externally. That intentionality is part and parcel of our human condition. It's fed into by various factors: our upbringing, the current culture we live in, the environment we're in, and also our karma, that is to say, tendencies and pressures, patternings which arise from distant causes in previous lives, which continue to manifest through us. Most of the time, of course, in Western culture, we have a very one-life focused vision of how things are. And so, from a Buddhist point of view, we misconstrue the nature of causal agency. We see a great deal as being created by actual interactive behavior in this life, and therefore we want to try to change that. This is quite a radical thing to put that into question. You know, in modern child development, particularly from a psychoanalytic point of view, we have an idea that children will internalize many of the features of their experience. They will develop what's called an object relations field, a certain set of patternings inside themselves, which will then become a template or a lens through which they move into interactions with the environment. So we would see that our adult life shows the traces and remnants of our childhood experience. from a Buddhist point of view, these childhood experiences were also generated by our karma, and whether they register powerfully with us or not is registered in terms of karma. Because clearly some people have terrible childhoods and get on with their lives, and other people have terrible childhoods and find great difficulty in entering into adult existence. Some people have easy childhoods and screw up massively as adults. Some people have easy childhoods and do very well. It's very difficult to see a simple causal relationship between what happens in childhood and adult life. And from a Buddhist point of view, the sort of missing factor there is the kind of background, almost invisible context, if you like, a kind of unconscious field, which is manifesting, and yet you can't quite see it. So, if we tend to be reactive, if we tend to be caught up in impulses and the immediacy of a situation, what can we do to stop that? One method, which is very much the method of Mahayana Buddhism, is to develop a profound intention, a conscious intention, which will act as a kind of will and a sense of force of direction, which one reinforces by developing more understanding of Buddhism, which becomes like a map. And the more you can develop a meditation practice that supports you in the carrying forward of your intention in the light of the overall map of existence provided by the Buddhist teachings, then you have a possibility of not being so much at the mercy of the toing and froing of the immediacy of lived situations. So, if you take the Bodhisattva vow, if you say that in this life and in all my future lives, I vow or I intend to work for the benefit of others, then at each moment of the day, you know what you're doing. That becomes the primary motivation and intention for everything. So you get up in the morning and you clean your teeth, you have a pee. I'm having a pee for the sake of all sentient beings. Why am I having a pee? For the sake of all sentient beings. Why am I having a cup of tea? For the sake of all sentient beings. The motive behind every activity, the maintenance of your body, the development of your skills, the relaxation that you need, all of that, you know why you do it. It is arising and organized on the basis of the vow. Which means at no time do you not know what you're doing. This grand intention becomes the organizing point of all life experience. You would then never be lost. You would never know what you were doing. So if you find yourself waiting at a bus stop or you're stuck in a traffic jam, what are you doing? I'm working for the service of all sentient beings. So how will I do it stuck in a traffic jam? I can do some practice, I can recall all sentient beings, I can remember that although my journey is being impeded by 20 minutes on the motorway, the lives of many beings are impeded by great suffering in torture camps, in prisons, in cancer wards, in the hell realms, and so on. So you can use your own situation through the amplification of the power of the vow, of this primordial or profound intention that you take up, something really from the root of your being. It means then nothing will knock you off course if you remember what it is. This is a central notion in Mahayana practice, the power of the vow. In the old days, when the great bodhisattvas were making their bodhisattva vow, they did it with the profound thought that when I become enlightened, I will use the power of my enlightenment to help people in a particular way. So that, for example, the Buddha Amitabha, when he took the Bodhisattva vow, promised, I will undertake whatever difficulties are necessary on the path, and by accomplishing the fulfillment of enlightenment, I will use its power to make my name so powerful that if somebody just remembers my name, they will be able to get enlightened instantly or easily. Therefore, my effort, my suffering, my diligence, I dedicate as a means of making other people's life easily, make it flow without so much hassle. So that gives us a flavor of the sense of an intention, that I will overcome all obstacles, nothing will get in my way. So now something is very big. I mean, the key thing that we can see when we encounter our own limitations and neurosis, that often the spirit is willing but the flesh is weak. The impulse takes us over. We decide to do something and then we find that we haven't actually done it. What is it that's causing this to occur? Usually it's that our felt sense of ourself, instead of being panoramic and expansive and being able to see whatever is going on, starts to become connected into what's in front of us. And we get our blinkers on and we collapse into it. So, why are we doing that? We may know that we don't need to do that, but we find ourselves doing it. So who is the one that is doing that activity? It's a collapsed part of ourselves. We could call it a self-state or a sub-personality. But having lost the articulation into the wider sense of ourselves, all our energy of this wide self gets mobilized into something rather narrow. And in that narrowness there is clearly a lot of push and volition, in a simple hydraulic sense, that if you've got water flowing down a pipe that's a foot across, and then the pipe diameter gets shrunk down and it's now only 6 inches across, as the water goes into that, the pressure is going to increase. And that's what happens inside ourselves. When you get caught up in something, you get more oomph. Whether that's lust or anger or jealousy or greed. That seems to be the case. So clearly, becoming small, forgetting the wider context, abandoning oneself into a narrow vision is rather dangerous. It's dangerous because it's a bit blind, it's over-focused, and it's over-intense just because of this pressure build-up. So one of the functions of a Bodhisattva vow is to say, I will hold in mind all sentient beings at all times. When I walk down the street, when I make a cup of coffee, when I chat to a friend, always I will hold in mind all beings. I will not forget others. That's a very radical decision, because it means I, from this day on, give up a private life. My life is now always public. It may be invisibly public, but it is still public, because I bring all beings to be with me at all times under all conditions. This is a great protection against collapsing into narrow, over-focused activity. Both because if one's attention is out to all of these beings with this great intention to help them, you've got a protection against collapse. And at the same time, if all these beings are there watching what you're doing, you're probably going to be shamed out of over-intensifying things too much, because we often do our worst activities in the privacy of what we regard as just our private sphere. To take the Bodhisattva vow is something enormously challenging. It says, I will be a servant for beings. I will give up mastery, and in particular, I will give up putting myself first. I will give up what's often translated as self-cherishing. That is to say, holding myself dear usually involves holding other people not so dear. If I make myself very precious and special, then other people will not be so precious and special, because I've put me first. So if I put other people first, then I put myself below them. Why would I want to do that? Usually we live in quite a hierarchical kind of world. We offer things up to big people and we put things down onto lesser people. We praise people with wonderful qualities and we want to control and denigrate people who seem to have lesser qualities. We may do this very explicitly, as in some traditional cultures, or we may do it implicitly, because we know that many of the products we have are made in countries like China, where they have a lot of very poor conditions for the production. But we can buy our commodities cheaply and then use our extra money to praise the people who we like, to buy them special presents, because the daily things that we need come to us cheaply because someone else is having this screw put on their head. So we're in this hierarchical world. What this is saying is we should be the servant of everyone. That the basis of my servitude is the other being's potential for awakening, not their qualities. Now, most of the time, we relate to people in terms of their qualities, whether they're interesting or not interesting, rich or not rich, young or not young, attractive or not attractive, intelligent, and so on. We all have our own particular criteria, and we think, oh, I like more of that and less of that. So we make our choices in the world. To take a Bodhisattva vow is to radically put that into question. It says, I will make myself available for people just because they exist. And the root of that existence is the mind. And the nature of that mind is the Buddha nature, is their possibility to awaken. Therefore, seeing this precious jewel in the heart of all beings, I will place them above me. Which means I will place torturers above me. I will place butchers above me. I will place murderers above me. I will not punish others. If there is punishment, I will take it on myself. This is a very strange kind of idea. Surely the good should be praised and rewarded, and the bad should be punished. Otherwise, how will society survive? But this would say, whenever I am happy, I give all my happiness to other beings. Whenever I feel sad, I will take all the sadness of other beings onto me. That's very strange. Normally we feel, whenever I'm happy, I want it to last as long as possible. Whenever I feel sad, I want it to be over as soon as possible. But this is a complete reversal. It says, I will give my happiness to Saddam Hussein. Why will I do that? Because he has a Buddha nature and he needs happiness more than me. Because the root of my happiness is my meditation practice and my understanding of the profound nature of existence, the unification of wisdom and compassion, of emptiness and manifestation. Saddam Hussein doesn't have that, so I will give him my happiness. Happiness comes and goes. Whoever had stable happiness. So I will give him my happiness. And I will take the unhappiness of all beings onto me. When that unhappiness lasts forever, it will also dissolve. Understanding emptiness and impermanence, I can become truly heroic. This is not about becoming some kind of masochistic. It's not self-punishing. It's not an ascetic practice. But it's to say, I will develop the capacity to deal with infinite suffering, because infinite suffering is moments of suffering, but the infinity of the mind has no limit. The mind itself has no top or bottom, no back or front, no beginning or end. Relaxing into the nature of the mind itself, all phenomena ceaselessly arise and pass, arise and pass. Good events arise, bad events arise. Recognizing this, I will open myself to dealing with it equally. Some days are good, okay. Some days are bad, why complain? Turning, 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 turning. This infinite expansiveness of the heart means that we're completely open to what's going on. I will not be set up by big happy events because they pass by. And I will not be diminished by sad, sad events because I'm not going to be locked inside them. Resting in the mind's nature, we recognize my mind is not created by good events, it's not destroyed by bad events. My mind is indestructible in its open root nature. And out of this openness arises these moments. Some are up, some are down. Being present with them in their illusory nature, we can participate more freely in the world. Because the root of our being is spaciousness, not manifestation. Whenever you try to stabilize a situation, it will come under pressure. Because nothing is stable. When I got to the train station yesterday, the train before had been cancelled, the train afterwards was cancelled, so there were a lot of people on the train. So I was going to sit quietly and read a book, and there are people shouting and pushing and banging. There was someone sitting next to me, and she was typing in her laptop with her elbow out in my face. I tried to hold my book up, but her elbow's going like that. That's what happens. So if you have a grand plan, on the train I'll have 2 hours and I'll just have quiet reading. It's not like that. On the train I'll find out what's going on in the train. And tomorrow I get the train back and it's Sunday and there's often delays on the train. So I can't think, I'll be back home by that time. I'll be back home when I get back home. It's like that. So how can we hold our life in a light way? If we overinvest patterns and plans and phenomena, they're always going to be banged by other things. It's a thing I've addressed a previous time I've been here. If we just think very briefly about the 5 elements, earth, water, fire, wind and air. We are very materialistic in our orientation. We are over-privileging the earth element all the time. We think we will have security. Security of family life, stability of marriages, financial security and so on. But the turbulence of the world is great. And if we try to resist it just by pushing it away, that often doesn't work. We just become very exhausted. Part of, I think, the way forward is to recognize turbulence is normal. You know, if you watch the news, there's always something going on. Why is there something going on? Because there's always something going on. Our world is turbulent. It is just turbulent. It's never calm. It's never ever calm. The Tibetan word for this world is jigten. Jig means dissolving or breaking or changing, something which is transity. And ten means a site. It's a site of impermanence. This world is a site of transition. Now, if that's what it actually is, to imagine that it will be stable is an absolute illusion. I work in the NHS and we've been developing plans for our small department. And now we have cuts of 9.2% this year, and next year I think 7% is coming. So all the plans that we had to grow and develop and the new things we were going to do, they're not going to happen. And in fact, we probably will lose a lot and we might be made redundant. We don't know yet. So in that way, all these mental constructs that I had of what we would be doing, they're revealed to me as just dreams. Well, just like rainbows in the sky. They look very attractive, and you have your proposals, and suddenly the rainbow's gone. That's what it is. The world is made of gossamer. It's not substantial. When we think that the earth element can be stabilized and dominant over everything else, this is a big illusion. Everything arises due to causes. And these causes are beyond our comprehension. We don't know why the world goes the way it does. So, we are participating in something which we can't step outside, rise above, and control. To be part of the world is to be disturbed. So, if we think, I don't want to be disturbed, I shouldn't be disturbed, it's not fair that I'm disturbed, you disturb yourself twice as much. The fact is, you will be disturbed because disturbance is what you get here. So if you can think, that's what we get. We are not living in North Africa. The sun is not shining. It is not warm. That's a fact. This is Macclesfield. So it's cold and it's damp. That's what it is. And so, can we live in this without having an opinion about it? Because that's the point where the ego's false agency comes in. I'm in a situation, it is what it is, but I don't like it. Can't we change it? This is the whole force of modernism, of ceaselessly acting on situations to try to improve them. And the government tries to improve the health service, perhaps not working. They try to improve the schools, perhaps it's not working. There are many, many things like the Child Support Agency. And maybe all these huge amounts of money, huge amounts of effort should give us pause for thought. Stalin's 5-year plans, Mao Zedong's Cultural Revolution. Again and again and again, people want to change things. We want to bring democracy to Iraq. Perhaps that's the wrong way of thinking about the world. From a Buddhist point of view, one should be more soft, more gentle, more subtle, and work with the energies of situation, finding a way to inhabit the world as it is in order to optimize the possibilities of connection and awakening, rather than attempting to change it. This is very, very important. And of course it's very challenging to our ego, because our sense of self wants to be in charge. Most of us don't like being too dependent on other people. The prospect of maybe getting old and potentially bedridden and having to be looked after by other people is often very terrifying, because we like to do things our way. And yet our way is such a fragile notion. We don't actually have much leverage on the world. So maybe it seems like there's a contradiction here. On the one hand, we take a Bodhisattva vow and we say we're going to save all sentient beings, and on the other hand, we can't control anything very much. How can that be? How can we be completely omnipotent and impotent at the same time? Maybe it's because awakening has nothing to do with controlling situations. Awakening has to do with being present in the situation as it occurs. To fully open into how things are with their manifold, their very different, diverse qualities, and not to try to dominate and control. To awaken is to be here in life as it is, to be in our sleep, awake as much as we can in our dreams, to be awake in the process of death, not to turn our gaze away, not to vanish into daydreams, into fantasies, not to knock ourselves out, but just to stay with our experience, however it is, knowing that we're foolish, knowing that we become limited, and just staying with that limitation. And this is the particular view of Dzogchen. If you stay present with your limitation, no matter how intense your limitation, you will not be limited. that's not the same as collapsing into the limitation. It's not the same as trying to step out with it and stop it. Say, for example, you're jealous. You find yourself often being jealous. To stay with the jealousy means to be present with the arising of jealousy, to know what it's like in your body, to know what it does to your tummy, to know what it does to your breathing, to be aware of the prickliness, the hypervigilance that goes with it, the rapid thoughts, that it's not fair, the risings of anger, the fallings into hopelessness, and just observing, oh yeah, this is me. One's not merged in it, nor is one trying to stand apart and say, oh, I hate myself when I'm like this. So many people do that. They think, I shouldn't be like this. I don't want to be like this. This is not who I really am. But we ain't really anything. We're just what's occurring. There is no real self as a substantial entity somewhere else. We are what we are. Now, if we can be with ourselves as jealousy, the jealousy comes and goes. So here was a shape that was arising, and you stay very close with it, present with it, not merged unconsciously in it, not just jealous, but not trying to distance yourself from it and stop it happening. And if you stay close with it, it will be there, and then it will clear, and you will still be there. And then something else arises, you stay with it, it goes, and you will still be there. And in that way, we start to be more seamlessly, continuously present through all the fluctuations of our existence. And in the Dzogchen tradition, that is really what awakening is. It means not to be asleep into dreams of confluence or flight. Running away from things doesn't take you anywhere except into mental busyness. Collapsing into a thought as if it was your true identity doesn't take you anywhere except into disillusionment. We are not anything. We are not anything. So, for example, I work in the hospital as a psychotherapist. And I have a title and an office and so on. This stuff is entirely contingent. It's dependent on all sorts of factors. There is nothing that guarantees me to be able to do that job for a long period of time. If the budget is cut more and more, I will lose my little office, I will lose my little world, and people will forget that I was ever there. While I inhabit it, I can hang on to it as if it was me. But that's an illusion. My job is not mine. My job is something I participate with due to the presencing of certain factors. These factors can easily be rearranged, and my life will be rearranged. The idea that I have a job, that I am that, is a way of becoming stupid. It doesn't mean that I am not that. It means one has to explore how to occupy that space in the manner of a dream, in the manner of theatre. If you're a mum and you've got kids, you are their mum. They call out mum and you're immediately there. And then they grow up and they're not so interested. So what was that mumness? What was the mumness of being a mum? It was something that arose on the basis of them being small and needy. As they get big and less needy, you're no longer that kind of mum. So you came into the position of being a mum with the birth of the child. And as the child grows up, you go through all different kinds of mumming, and gradually it becomes less and less your existence. So, to build a house on that kind of identity is crazy. What you can do is participate in the experience of mumming, because it is clearly an activity to be a mum. You can't sit in an armchair with your arms crossed and be a mum. You know, mums are always running around. It's an activity. But being a bus driver is an activity. All our identities are active. There is no identity that we have in our ordinary world which is not something which is done. Either we do it or something does it to us. If we stop doing things, who will we be? This is the central question of meditation. In meditation, we want to observe what happens as thoughts come and go. As the thought starts to go, is there anyone still there? Who is the one who is there, present with these flows of thoughts? Because, as we're looking just now, often our identity seems to be merged into the pattern of thoughts that's occurring. We are identified with the thought. I am this. This is happening to me. I am hungry. I am thirsty. I'm bored. I want to go out. I want this. I want that. If we just sit with these thoughts and they come and go, who is the one who is still there? That one who is still there, still there, because they're still. They're the one that's not moving. Everything else is moving. The aspect of ourselves which is aware is the aspect which is not actually in the movement. So when the movement stops, we're still there, and yet we are also part of the movement. This is the non-duality of stillness and movement. It's not that we are one thing or another. It's not that we are really, really still and we just happen to be moving. It's that whatever movement is occurring is coming out of the stillness. Our mind is spacious, relaxed and calm, and full of movement. And the traditional example is the sky. The sky as space is just open. You can't find the sky, but when we look out we see all sorts of patterns of clouds. Sometimes the clouds come very close and fill the whole sky. Sometimes they're very light and fluffy, and sometimes they vanish. The sky is always open, even when it's full of clouds. In the same way, our mind is always open, even when there's a lot of activity going on. But if we are always tilted towards the activity, we won't see what's behind it and through it. It's not that the sky should really, really be clear, because if you live in this kind of climate, the sky's usually got some clouds in it. It's not that the clouds are spoiling the sky, but the very nature, the very openness of the sky offers hospitality to the clouds. The very openness of our mind means that we can be good and bad. We can be generous, we can be selfish. We can be loving and caring and up for ourselves. All of these things can arise and pass. But just like the clouds come and go without leaving a permanent track on the sky, good deeds that we do don't make the sky of our mind any better or brighter. And bad deeds don't make it any worse. That is to say, the domain of manifestation of how we are has relevance only in terms of its contingency, of how we are and who we interact with. It doesn't define who we really are. Which is why we can say the most horrible people who have ever existed have Buddha nature. They are really Buddhas. So, people who work in torture camps, people who fix electrodes to other people's bodies and turn on the power and watch them suffering, writhing in agony, and they don't switch it off. These people have Buddha nature. Their mind, in the very moment when they're torturing someone, is open. But their energy, the focus of their attention, is caught up in what is going on, locked into a conceptualization. This person is scum. This person is the enemy. They deserve this. So the very intensity of the manifestation that's arising in the mind is blinding the person to the ground out of which that manifestation is occurring. Yeah? So if we then say, but only a terrible person could do that, I'm not like that, I wouldn't like to do that. What we do is we create an entity. There are some kinds of people who we call terrible people, and terrible things are done by terrible people. Makes a lot of sense. But when you hear Tony Blair talking about terrorists, it doesn't make so much sense. All the troubles in the world are caused by a few terrorists. If only we can find them, and having your DNA samples is going to help that. Once we've got the iris recognition system going, and the sweat recognition system, and the size of shoe recognition system, we will know who the terrorists are, and we'll get rid of them, and then we'll all be happy forever. It looks ludicrous when governments do that, but we do the same thing all the time. We say, I don't want to hang out with bad people, I just want to hang out with good people. So who are the good people? Well, when you meet people for the first time, they seem kind of nice, and then after a while, they look a bit more problematic. So where are the really, really, really good people? Where are they? Problem. Everybody's good and bad. Our minds are turbulent. We're in a world where lots of things are happening. So if we spend our time categorizing on the level of manifestation and trying to make choices on the basis of control, we're endlessly busy. But if we look back through history, it hasn't actually taken us very far. Because how can we be sure that the categories we are employing just now to work out who's good and who's bad are correct? Where I grew up in Scotland, growing up in a Protestant family, it was very clear that Catholics were bad. You don't need to have any doubt. Catholics are bad, the English are bad. That's, we see that all over the world. People have their category systems. It's very quick, very easy. When you actually get close to people and you engage with them, you think, oh, I never thought they'd be like that. So, people are always complicated. But we, finding complication difficult, try to control it by imposing heuristic devices, explanatory devices that categorize according to simplified criteria. And then, in the face of the evidence that actually the world doesn't fit our criteria, we say, fuck the world, I like my criteria. I trust my mind, I don't trust other people. There's a lot of that about. Tony Blair does it very nicely for us. He's incredibly useful, both. He's very useful because he exemplifies exactly that kind of stupidity. He believes he is right. And he drives things through according to his beliefs. And because he does it on a very big canvas, we can see how mad it is. And we do exactly the same. We don't want to know. So there we see how attachment displaces us from the ongoing dynamic movement of the world, puts us into a box where we're constantly out of sync with the world, trying to impose our values or retreating into ourselves and saying, oh, it's all too much for me, I can't cope with that. But that is what we're living in. Where can you jump out of the world into? There is nowhere to hide. In the hospital I see patients who say, I don't want anything to do with anyone. I say, take your clothes off then. And get out of that chair. It's not your chair, why are you sitting there? That chair was made by someone. You don't want anything to do with anyone? Go and find a place to walk that's got nothing to do with anyone. All the landscape in Britain has been affected by human beings. What are you going to stand on? A stone in the sea? It's completely mad. You want to live life on your terms with me paying my taxes to feed you and clothe you. What is this? I don't know. It's a madness. It's an absolute illusion. So, the Bodhisattva vow is very powerful because it says, I willingly connect myself forever to a bunch of tossers. Isn't that amazing? I do it willingly. I say these people who are just out to lunch, who are crazy, who haven't a clue what they're doing, and I am going to take myself and all my lovely energy and put it in their service. And why would I do that? Because I have no choice, because they are my world. Other people are our existence. However they are is how we are. We're all in it together. You can't opt out. There's no place to opt out to. So working for the benefit of others is paradoxically, of course, working for the benefit of yourself. To be with other people and to see their potential is to remind oneself of how one can betray one's own potential. Because to abandon the other is to abandon yourself. Whenever we say me first, we've cheated ourselves. Because the me that is the me first is not a me that's very comfortable to be with in the long run. Putting ourselves first always ends up putting ourselves last. Because if you try to put yourself first and you're greedy and pushy, you end up creating situations which don't work out. Would that seem to fit your experience? So this Bodhisattva idea is very profound. It's both an absolute volition, because you have to decide it from the depth of your being, and at the same time it is absolutely given, because self and other are born together. The great illusion is the illusion of duality, that self and other are separate. But all day long we are in an environment, and at night as we fall asleep and we enter into dreams, they're interactive, things are going on. Subject and object are always moving together. You cannot get out of samsara on your own, because samsara is a state where subject and object appear to be separate, but are of course always together. The only way out of samsara is to awaken to the fact of non-duality, that the spaciousness of being and the movement of being are inseparable. And the movement of being is the movement of all beings. That how we are is always influenced by others. Nobody has power to control the deal. When the Chinese came into Tibet, these big lamas got pushed out of their monasteries, some were killed, some were stripped naked, many were locked up and tortured, many fled over the mountains in the snow and the rain. They didn't have much power. It is an illusion to imagine that mastery is possible in this domain. What we can have, though, is an exquisite nuancing of participation. We can become more alive, more precisely connected with all that we meet. So that instead of approaching the world inside a kind of package deal of ourselves, our thoughts and assumptions about who we are, we tilt our energy out through our senses and experience the shape of the world as it is and respond into that. So that rather than having to know in advance what we have to do, we allow the fact that the world is always co-creating us with itself. That's quite nice. It's not all up to you. How you are is also created by others. So if you just trust that, it'll be okay. I see so many patients who say, but I don't know what to say. I spoke with a guy on Thursday, and he said, yeah, well, I invited this girl out, and I just kept thinking, what am I going to say? What am I going to say? And she was interested in movies, and she was talking about movies, but I don't see many movies, so I didn't know what to say. So I kept think of what would I say? And I said, well, did you listen to her talking about the movies? No, I was trying to think of what to say. And of course we do that as well. That self-preoccupation is stupid, because it cuts you off from what's there. And if we are with what's there, it's not a closed steel ball, it's actually lots of tendrils when you look out into the world, there's lots of stuff there, and it's little shining, glimmering things. So you walk down the street, there's usually at least one person you can smile at. You know, there's usually at least one little blackbird hopping about. There's usually one last little leaf swinging in the tree. You know, there's something to connect with. And then you're into something. And then you're into something else, and into something else. And cooking it up inside yourself is not necessary. So, part of the Bodhisattva vow is the externalization of one's existence. Not that we'll find the truth of our being somewhere deep inside us. There is no inside. When we sit in meditation, there is no inside or outside. It's not some mystery hidden deeply within us. To help others is to be alive in our senses in a world which is always unfolding. So maybe just before we break for lunch, we could just sit and do a little practice. What we can do, just sitting in a relaxed way, just with our gaze open into the space in front of us. We can recite Ah 3 times, slowly, just breathing out and just relaxing into the space. Just nothing to do, and just as much as you can, be present with life as it tumbles forward. Okay. So we'll do more practice in the afternoon, and we'll look at a brief text which describes the basic principles of Lojong. And there's a translation of it in a frame at the back of the room if you want to look at it beforehand. Do you want to say something about the time frame of the day?